I'd like to start this study with just a little information for you about the book, What the Bible Teaches About Mercy, which is all these lessons are based on. If you would like a copy, you can get one, and there will be information about that on the screen eventually, but it's simply a matter of writing to me, Doug, at evergreencenterinc.org, and requesting a copy, and we can make arrangements for that. We do have to purchase them, and so there would be a fee, but for anyone that can't afford any of the things that I'm talking about, either my book later or the book What the Bible Teaches About Mercy, we are glad to send it at no charge if you can't afford it. Now, in this lesson, we're going to move into what we might call the have mercy on me passages. If you're a Bible student, you're quite familiar with that cry, have mercy on me, Son of David. And we have to do a little bit of technical work first. I think it's important to hear a little bit about the Greek words that are used in the New Testament for mercy and for grace and for compassion. Somehow just knowing these words and not trying to teach Greek or emphasize it, but just to get a little bit of a footing for us in the language of the New Testament, which is Greek. So bear with me as we cover this. I'll do it as carefully as I can. I think many of you would know that the word grace in English translates most often the Greek word charis, from which we get our English word charity. It's a very lovely word in Greek. I can read here from Thayer's lexicon, where he says the Greek word charis indicates that which affords joy and pleasure and delight and sweetness and charm and loveliness. And there's a beauty about love in that word charis. The most famous use of the word, of course, is in 1 Corinthians 13. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity. Actually, I better back up on that. That might be the word agape. I'll check that out. But the word grace is often in Paul's mouth. Grace to you and peace be multiplied. So I'll repeat that again. It's what affords joy, pleasure, delight, sweetness, charm, and loveliness. That's the word grace in Greek. It's a very lovely word. The second word, compassion, comes out as oiktirmos in Greek. It means the idea of feeling excited by someone's misery, another's tears, another's need, and calls forth something in the depths of a being that we would call compassion. That's the Greek word there for compassion. But then we have our word mercy that we're studying. And in Greek, the word is eleos. And properly speaking, it's to feel sympathy with the misery of another, but especially such sympathy as manifests itself in an act, although it can also manifest itself in a word. A criminal, I'm reading from Thayer's lexicon, a criminal begs eleos of his judge, mercy. But hopeless suffering is often the object of it. Eleos is the generic word for reaching out to need, meeting need. And we will find out later that if you're a Jew speaking Hebrew and you come across the New Testament in Hebrew, you will discover that the word chesed appears many times in translation back in from Greek into Hebrew. And the word that is most often used in the translation is chesed, but it matches more fully the meaning of the word grace in Hebrew, in Greek, I mean, charis. Charis and chesed are the closest relatives in those languages. Chesed in Hebrew, charis in Greek. Little technical, and I'm not real good at any of this, but just that little background so that when we maybe point out the use of a word, for example, Luke 2, verse 40, the grace of God was upon John the Baptist. The grace of God was on him. That's the word charis. Or in the salutation of Gabriel to Mary, he said to her, "Fear not, Mary, you have found grace or favor, charis, with God." It's good to associate that word charis with the word grace. Whereas mercy, for example, and the Hebrew word, the Greek word eleos in Ephesians 2, 4, and 5, but God who is rich in mercy is eleos. He is rich in that quality. And then in the use of the word oiktirmos, or compassion, very close to the Hebrew word rachamim, that great inward tenderness of love, compassion. If I were to use the framework that I've introduced earlier, this is all about love, and that's not confusing. Love is just simply expressed so beautifully by the three words: grace in the face, compassion, the choosing of love, to connect with the person in need, and mercy, the actual doing of love, what love does. Those three things come out nicely in Greek as well as in Hebrew. It's not really terribly important to know that, but for some who are interested perhaps in a more technical look at these words in the New Testament, that's a small introduction to it. You can research it yourself to see that what I'm saying is so. In this lesson, we're concentrating on the plea for mercy. Have mercy on me. This is important because when that word is used by someone in approaching Jesus, there's a recognition that that is what he will give. So let's take the first example of that. This is taken from chapter 19 of what the Bible teaches about mercy. And it's found in Matthew 9 and verse 27. I'll read the verses and then we'll talk about it a little bit. And when Jesus departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, "Thou Son of David, have mercy on us." And when he, Jesus, was come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus saith unto them, "Believe ye that I am able to do this?" They said unto him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith be it unto you." and their eyes were opened. They were physically blind, and they had a great need. Jesus evidently conveyed to them, we don't know how they knew or what they had seen or known of Jesus, but something about him conveyed to them the understanding that not only would he say, I feel sympathy toward you, I have favor toward you, but I can do what you need because I am God's will, and God's will is mercy, and if you believe that, I'll give it to you. It'll be yours. Because he asked them, do you believe I can do this? They said, yes. Well, how certain is the mercy of God? Many examples come to mind. But let me bring it down to something that's going on right now in the world. I've mentioned this earlier, and I will mention it further. Israel is in the grip of blindness. Sin itself is a blindness, isn't it? Jesus said to the Pharisees, if you would just say, we're blind, you could see. But you keep saying, we can see, and your blindness remains. Well, is it any harder for God to open the eyes of a blind man physically than it is to open the eyes of my heart or your heart to the wonder of his mercy in Jesus? Or can he do it for a whole nation? Can he remove the blindness that's over Israel? Paul thinks so. He says so. But it will be a revelation of Jesus crucified that imparts into the heart the faith that he will give us the mercy we need. I have a sense that I'm perhaps not explaining it as well as I should. The men that are described here, apparently it's a different story than blind Bartimaeus, but blindness was a condition of being a beggar. That's how you made your living. I've encountered real life beggars in Israel as well as in India. What does it mean to be so poverty-stricken that you have nothing? In those days, especially if you were blind, you had nothing. You had no way to support yourself except by begging. And then to come in touch with the understanding there's a person here that can relieve me of my blindness. And so an urgency comes in. We'll see that with blind Bartimaeus. The more the crowd told him to be quiet, the more he said, the louder he called. I'm trying to express something, friends. When you don't know that you have a need, your desire for mercy is small. It's when you know you have a deep need that your understanding of the mercy of God comes a spark into you. I can have what I need. Evidently, that's what sparked in the hearts of these two blind men. He can meet our need, and we're desperate. Obviously, we're working through the New Testament, starting what the Bible teaches about mercy in the New Testament. In Matthew 15, and beginning in verse 22 through 31, we have the story of the Canaanite woman, a story that is so misunderstood by many. And I've had people challenge me on it. But in Matthew 15, we read about the woman from Syrophoenicia, Tyre and Sidon, a woman of Canaan. She wasn't a Jew. She was outside the Jewish circle, but she had heard of Jesus. And she came to him, and she uttered the same words that the blind men did. She says in Matthew 15 and verse 22, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil." I wonder what her home life was like. What was it like to be the mother of this girl? What kind of behavior did the girl exhibit? I've been in the presence of people who were so controlled by the devil. Sometimes one wonders when we say someone is addicted, how much involvement does the enemy have in that? Nonetheless, this woman came, and with the heart of an intercessor, we've talked about this before, she has a passion to her request. She has an urgency to her request. "Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil." And the disciples, not yet understanding Jesus as the embodiment of the will of God, the manifestation of his actual name, say, "Send that woman away. She's annoying us." Now people say, well, Jesus, being a good Jew, didn't want to deal with this woman, a Gentile. I don't believe that's the case. I believe what he said next was a reflection of the thoughts of the disciples. I think he was doing mercy to both the woman and to his disciples in this story. He was saying in his words what the disciples were thinking. "I'm not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." We're the ones. We're the Jews. We have the truth. I'm not sent to you. Go away. And the disciples besought him, it says in verse 23, begged him, "Send her away. She cries after us." But in verse 25, here's the key into the understanding of this story. She came closer. She drew near to him, and she worshiped him. And she said, "Lord, help me." What drew her? Why did she come closer? Why didn't she turn away in disappointment? Could it have been his eyes? Could it have been his voice? Could it have been the spirit that she felt emanating from him, the compassion which Jesus was of God, God's compassion? Instead of being deflected and disappointed, she drew near to him and worshiped him. And one more time, Jesus spoke the thoughts of the disciples. He said, it's not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs. My, what would you have done if you were begging for mercy and he intimated that you were a dog? The woman answered, and I'm sure she heard something in his voice. And she said, it's true, Lord. I'm a dog. I'm a Gentile dog, but even the dogs get to eat of the crumbs under the table. He said to her, woman, your faith is great. It'll be done as you wish. Your daughter will be made whole. And she was from that hour. Are you tracking with what I'm saying? Do you sense what was going on there? And Jesus was showing the disciples how self-righteous they were. We're the ones, not her. And at the same time drawing the woman to himself by her words, by his words. Let's see that again let's take up Matthew 17 and verse 15. Matthew 17. And there comes to him a man with a boy that is apparently possessed of an evil spirit, and he throws himself in the water and in the fire, and the disciples can't help, and he begs Jesus in the urgency of his heart. Again, I'm so taken by what was his home life like to have a son like that? What was it like to live with a boy like that? You fathered that child, and he can't control himself. Something's trying to kill him. And the disciples have not been able to cast the enemy out. And the man falls at Jesus' feet and says, help me. And Jesus says, if you can believe, he'll be all right. But Jesus hears him. He says, help my unbelief. And then he does the mercy the man is in need of. You don't appreciate, I don't appreciate the mercy that is in Jesus until I come to the point of utter need and utter desperation. That's when I truly get it. That's when I have the answer to the need. Quickly, do you remember the story of the disciples that got their mother involved in trying to persuade Jesus to give them a good place in the kingdom? Do you remember how they said to Jesus, we want you to do whatever we shall ask? Now that's our position mostly, isn't it? We want to be the king and Jesus to be our answer to all our desires that aren't quite right. Jesus said, you don't know what you ask. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink of? They said, oh yes, of course we can. But then he gave them a teaching. He said, you're asking for something big. It's not even my place to give it. Only my Father knows. And the whole world is run that way by a hierarchy. But do you understand that I'm not like that? Do you understand that I'm your servant? I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. That was a mercy he gave to them. And then he demonstrated it immediately afterward. And that's the story of blind Bartimaeus. And again, he's a man desperate. He needs healing. He needs sight. And even the people saying to him to be quiet, which in Hebrew is sheket, which is not a very nice word, it means shut up. In spite of that, Jesus said, bring him to me. And he said the words that only Jesus in mercy says to us, what would you like me to do for you? The same words that he said to James and John in that incident preceding this one. What do you want me to do for you? They wanted something big for themselves. Jesus sidestepped that. The beggar, blind Bartimaeus, wanted his need filled. And Jesus asked him, what would you like me to do? And he said, that I may receive my sight. Jesus said, here it is. It's yours. There's something in these stories, something in this word that probes deep into our hearts. What is it that we really want from Jesus? Do we see our real need? Or do we want to consume it upon our own lusts, as James says? Part of this study will result in you learning to ask for the right thing, not only for yourself, as we see in Bartimaeus and the other blind men, but we see it in the Syrophoenician woman, the Canaanite woman. It's for my daughter. It's for my daughter. We see it in the man who brings his son. It's for my son. The Lord is probing you and probing me, always. What do you want of me? And will it match what I love to give? My will is mercy. I will give it if it's asked for. Hi, I'm Doug Dietert, and I'm holding in my hand the book on which all of my lessons on mercy were based. It's called What the Bible Teaches About Mercy. And I'd love for you to have a copy if you'd like one. You can write to me at doug@evergreencenterinc.org, and we'll arrange for you to get a copy. That's doug@evergreencenterinc.org.